Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nature Drawing. Today is a very special iteration of the Introduction to Nature Drawing. But first, my name is James Sisti. I'm a professional artist and a wilderness guide. Today, I'm going to be your instructor. And the reason why today's class is special is because it's sponsored by the Dedham Public Library. The Dedham Public Library and Hike and Draw teamed up, and together we're raising funds for the Dedham Food Pantry. It's a difficult time, as we all are very well aware. So the things we can do, no matter how big or small, go a long way. And if it's putting a warm meal in someone's belly or a smile on someone's face, we're all for it. So thank you for everybody who participated in today's class. This is all going to be helping a good cause. And towards the end of class, I'll go ahead and make announcements about the other programs that we have lined up with the Dedham Public Library. So just thank you very much for everybody over there who set this up. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So today's agenda, we're going to be discussing our goals for nature drawing. We'll be going over the type of kit and gear that we'll be using, as well as the type of stuff you can bring out into the field for your own naturalist work. We're going to talk about how we can get started, and then we'll be jumping right into a warm-up exercise. We're going to work with a nature object. If you didn't bring a nature object with you to class, that's fine. I have several from my hike today that we can use together. And then we're going to be doing a long form drawing exercise, which I provided the reference for you either on the Eventbrite page or in the email. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And just really quick to reiterate our goals. So nature drawing isn't just about making pretty pictures. In fact, it's a great way to connect more deeply with nature, and in doing so, cultivate your own curiosity about the things that are happening in the natural world around you. It provides a great opportunity to look more closely at the natural world, to find things that you would normally not notice, and to ask questions and learn answers. That puts you in a wonderful position to not only learn, but also to share your observations and the things you've learned with other people in a very creative and personal way. So it's a great habit. Nature drawing is one of my favorite hobbies, and hopefully at the end of today's class, it'll be one of yours too. So getting started is actually quite simple. It's one of the most affordable hobbies in the world. All you need is some paper, a pencil, and a pen. My baseline kit usually consists of a sketchbook or a nature journal, and either a mechanical pencil and a fountain pen. That's the bare minimum that I know I'm going to use. For folks who have more acumen with different mediums, I think it's great to go and bring color pencils and watercolors and even oil paints if you know you're going to use them. In order to avoid carrying around more than you have to, the baseline kit will suit you just well. I've also started keeping a field notebook as well. So if I want to make sure that I have a nice, neat nature journal, I can do all my messy field work in my pocket notebook and then transfer those notes over to my my good copy when I get home later. So we're going to get right into it. And this is one of the things I like to do is teach people how to draw three-dimensional objects. I think it's wonderful to practice from photographs, but the difference between drawing with a photograph and an actual three-dimensional object is it's just your brain tackles it differently. Your brain processes the information differently. And when you get an opportunity to collect something from the trail or bring it home to study it closer, just feeling it in your hand, being able to understand the texture, being able to, like for example, if it's aromatic, if it's something that has a texture that you simply couldn't glean from a photograph, that's where it also becomes more important. So I'll go ahead and I'll give you an example of that. This is typically what we do when we draw nature objects. I'm going to teach you not only how to draw it, but also how to include some scientific data in it as well. So that way it'll add some informational value to your drawing, and that way you'll be able to keep track of the things you've observed over time with more intention. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my camera here. I have the camera facing me, but I also have a top-down camera. And these are the supplies that I'm going to be using, right? Just I have a couple of pieces of paper, 2 pencils, and my eraser and pencil sharpener. And I'm going to go ahead and select this nice small gray colored card stock for my drawing. And I'd like to share with you 3 separate nature objects that I picked up on the trail today. And if anybody knows what these are, you can definitely call out. Okay.
Are they galls?
That is absolutely correct. They are galls. So I had no idea what these were until I started hiking in the spring, and I saw these things starting to form on different types of trees. And I found a perfect specimen here because you can actually see the type of leaf. This is an oak leaf, and you can tell by its rounded lobes that it's probably an eastern white oak leaf. And you can just you can see how the leaf is totally consumed by this sort of papery material. Now, I don't know if you've ever gotten to handle a piece of hive before, but it essentially feels like that. It's a very crinkly, almost like a dried leaf sort of texture. And what I'm going to do is, since I have 3 different specimens, I'm going to crack one of these open so we can go ahead and take a look inside. Now, inside, part of me was kind of hoping that we'd see some live animal in there, but you can see that there's an interesting, very spongy material there. Now, what's up with that, right? The thing that I've come to find is during my hikes, it's not only nice to observe, but also to investigate, to really explore the thing that fascinates me up close and get personal with it. So if I were to describe this texture, it's kind of fluffy, like almost like a cotton or a sponge inside. Now, what forms these galls, right? I know we have a master naturalist here. Not to put you on the spot, but Bev, do you know what forms these galls on oak leaves?
I think it's a wasp.
That's absolutely right.
What I just said was.
Yeah. So what happens is the wasps, when they lay their eggs, will inject, usually in the petiole of the leaf or somewhere along the mid-rib of the leaf, their eggs. And what that will do is cause a reaction. And I know sometimes if you ever gotten a splinter in your finger and you see what happens when it gets infected and it pusses up, that's your body's immune system reacting to a foreign body. Now, the galls are slightly different in a sense, but essentially what's happening is the wasp is using the leaf as a host for its eggs. And this spongy material here surrounds where the eggs go. And eventually what's going to happen is the eggs will hatch. And if you look here, you'll see some holes. Okay. And that's where the baby wasps come out of. Okay. So why draw this when we can take a photograph? Well, drawing is a great way to sort of slow down time and to absorb material more fully and hopefully notice something that you wouldn't normally notice otherwise. So I'm going to select this one as my drawing subject. And if you have a different nature object at home that you'd like to draw, feel free to do that as well. So I'm going to position this object here, and I'm going to try my best not to touch it while everybody's focusing. But I'm going to go ahead and start my drawing by simply creating a frame or a margin, okay? And this is going to be the area in which we are responsible for as artists. We're going to look at this rectangle here like it is our domain. So inside, we're going to draw, it doesn't have to be perfect, we're going to draw our nature object. Now on the outside, we can add some notes, which is what we'll do later. But in order to get started, we're going to put our artists' identities away, and we're going to take out our architect hats, and we're going to look at this and approach this subject like architects, meaning we're going to construct the drawing step by step together. Now, one way in which we do this is we consider the proportion of the object itself, right? We have a height and we have a length, so a width and a length. So let's go ahead and make this object just a little bit bigger than it appears in real life. And I'm going to say the width is about, the length rather is about this long, okay? And the height or the width is going to be about, let's say about this, okay? We don't have to make it an exact science right now. So I have a sort of diamond shape consisting of 4 dots on the paper. And this is where I'm going to start constructing my drawing. Now, you had heard earlier that that whole thing about the dots. Well, the philosophy here is that if you can draw a dot, you can draw everything. A dot is the simplest form of mark making. And we use them to plot our coordinates, almost like we're plotting a diagram or creating a blueprint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to notice the outer edge on the top of this gall here. And I'm going to plot very intentionally using my pencil and dots. This is going to be the top half of our gall, okay? So there's this part here where the leaf comes out. I'm not so worried about that yet, okay? I'm just looking at this upper hemisphere of the gall. Oops, sorry, I just moved it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider the bottom hemisphere, okay? And I'm just going to walk my way around. And this is a great time to sort of reconsider that initial guess that we made about the proportions and the dimensions of this object, right? Because I don't want you to think about an inaccuracy as a mistake. Just think about it as a measurement. You can always adjust a measurement. That's fine. Don't think about it like a mistake. So we have this sort of spherical object, and it looks like it's a little bit crushed on the top here. So that's why that indent is here. And we also have this area where the leaf sort of grows into the gall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, if the leaf is growing into the gall, then I'm going to come into the circle a little bit here, and I'm just going to make a little reference. I have a slightly different perspective than you do, so it may not come out exactly the same as you have, and that's fine. But I'm just going to go ahead and make some dots just like this, and they don't have to be perfect. Just a general sort of outline, okay, of that leaf. All right, and we'll leave that alone for right now. And you might be saying, well, what's this got to do with drawing? I'll show you in a second. So what we consider here as just a mass of dots is kind of our blueprint. It's our starting point. Remember, we're thinking like architects. It's a very step-by-step process. How might we create a drawing from these dots? Well, think about it like a game of connect the dots, except you're not subjected to such strict rules as having to connect every single dot perfectly. Just think about them like guidelines, right? This is your sort of blueprint. So you're not required to trace them perfectly. In fact, I'd encourage you to actively edit and try to check yourself and see if your measurements are correct. And if they're not, all you have to do is adjust course, kind of like what I did here. Okay. Notice how the line is slightly off from where I put the initial dots. Same thing here. The initial guess of the height of the object is slightly off, but that's fine. I remeasured it and I corrected it, and now it's more accurate. Okay, so I'm just going to continue up my way here, walking my way there. And then there's this little fold in the material that I want to account for. And then I'll proceed just like this. Okay, now as I get to this portion here, I'm noticing that my gall is a little bit wider than I thought it was. So I'm going to, or a little bit narrower than I thought it was. So I'm going to bring it in just a little bit and actively edit my line so that it's more directly proportional to the actual object in front of me. Okay. So for now, we have something that's becoming our nature object slowly but surely. And what are some of the things that we're noticing as we're drawing, right? Like I'm noticing these textures and how it sort of has this kind of a golf ball like appearance with all these little spots covering it. Okay. I wonder what that looks like when it's fresh, like if this is a different color. Okay, I'm also looking at this papery sort of texture and these tears in the material, right? I'm not using dots for those. And the reason why is because sometimes my mind wanders while I'm drawing and I kind of get absorbed in that. But since we did the outline first, it's gotten us to the point where we can kind of take liberties like that, right? Now, what about this whole jumble over here? What are we going to do about this leaf? Okay. Well, what we can do is start by defining the petiole of the leaf. This is the part of the leaf that comes off that stem there. And I made reference to a midrib earlier. The midrib is the part of the leaf, that main vein that kind of comes through the center of the leaf, or the middle, midrib, okay? And you're gonna notice these smaller veins that kind of come off. And that's what we like to call a pinnate arrangement. So that for example, this white oak leaf is pinnately lobed. And lobes are exactly what you think they are. Those little, like kind of like earlobes. On white oaks, these lobes are rounded, whereas on red oaks, they are pointed. Okay, so that's a little oak factoid for you there. Okay, and you get to see a little bit of the underside from my perspective here. So I'm just going to make reference to that very quickly. And I found this leaf, it was already on the forest floor. So what probably happened is when the trees lost their foliage, this probably was still up in the tree and it fell off with all the rest. And typically these oak leaves will be a red or a yellow. And those are the results of what I like to talk about. This is all stuff I talk about in our botanical class, by the way. Carotenoids, that is, I believe, what makes the yellows and the oranges in the leaves. And the way you can kind of remember that is a carrot is orange or yellowish, so carotenoids. It's not spelt that way, but it's a way to kind of remember that. Does anybody know what causes the reds? It's a really hard word to say, so no problem if anybody doesn't know how to say that.
Cyano something.
Yep, you got it. You got it. Cyanthin. I That's why I was asking for help. I can't even say it right.
It's not
Cyanthin?
phytoerythrin?
I don't.
I got the first four letters. CYAN.
Yes. Cyanthin, I think it is. Yes. That's a tongue twister for you. So as I'm just connecting the dots, I want to give you an example of active editing, right? It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to show it. Let's say I'm not happy with that leaf. Let's say I didn't really quite capture it the way I wanted to. What do I do at this point? Well, I don't encourage erasing right away. Instead, what I encourage doing is just stopping and looking. And there's a portion here that, let's say, for example, it's a little bit wider like this. And you have this nice, elegant little fold that comes down like that. Just like it is on the top, but let's say I just want to change the perspective on it to be like that instead. I do that drawing first in order to really commit confidently, because that's something that I'm doing based on direct observation, right? And I want to make those decisions confidently because, after all, we care about this. We're putting time into this, right? So what I do is, after I do that edit, I do the edit first and then I'll erase second. And I have this nice kneaded eraser here, which is great because it doesn't destroy the paper like those pink erasers do. Okay. And I'll just go ahead in here, okay, and fortify that original edit that I made, just like that. And then I could take a look, step back. Yep, I feel good about that. And I'll even add a little section of the leaf. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. That's just barely sticking out like that. Okay, so now that we have this weird meatball-esque looking thing with a leaf sticking out of it, how do we make it a more interesting nature drawing? So what we do next is we can consider the texture. We can consider the light value. How is light relating to it? We can also go ahead and add some text notes as well. But before we do that, I think it might be kind of cool to add some light value. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to notice where these shadows are. Okay, and I'm just going to very, very lightly shade in this crevasse here. okay? But I'm also gonna teach you a new trick. This is called line weight. So line weight, especially if you've been in art school, you've heard this term before. Line weight talks about the thickness or the heaviness of a line. So you see that there's a shadow under the nature object here. Rather than coloring in that whole shadow, what I can do is just simply make the line where that shadow is thicker, just like this. Okay, and I'm not going to do it all the way around. I'm only going to do it where the shadow is. And already I'm suggesting a different light value. I could do it on the petiole here on the leaf. I could do it at the base of this leaf. And this is the sinus, by the way, that little like if these are the lobes, the indentations of the leaves are called the sinuses. Okay, so I'll go in there on the sinuses and I'll also look under here where this fold is. I really like that. So I'm going to make that little darker line there. All right, and see what that effect has. See, it's very simple. All you're doing is you're looking and seeing where shadow is happening, and you're reinforcing that shadow, not by shading in, but just by simply darkening a line, just like that. And you want to be careful and to show that there are lighter values by using lighter lines. Okay, so that way you avoid the whole process of shading, but you're still suggesting shadow, just like that. Okay. So now that we've got that done, how do we add some texture? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the tip of my pencil from being very pointy to kind of having a different shape altogether. So I'm going to grab a piece of scrap paper I have over here on the side. Actually, I'll just use the back side of the paper I'm going to use later. And I'm going to start by making very, very, very tiny circles. This is a technique that we're going to be using in our other drawing, in our long form exercise. So it's good to teach you this now so you could use it later. So what I'm doing is I'm grinding the tip of my pencil into a sort of chisel or flat tip. Okay. And this is a nice circular motion that is going to consistently embed material from the pencil, graphite in this instance, into the paper. And I'm not pressing very hard at all. I'm just pressing barely enough, just enough to get the mark on the page, really. It's the weight of the pencil resting on the paper, okay? So here you can see, at this point, I went from a very pointy tip in the beginning of this drawing. Now what I have here, if you can, the camera will adjust. There we go. It's sort of a chisel tip. See how it's flat at the tip like that? That's how you want your pencil when you begin shading, okay? So you want a nice flat tip on your pencil to glide over the surface of the paper. And you want to barely put any weight on this at all. So I'm looking and I'm seeing this little shadow here, right where the leaf is going inside the gall, okay? And I'm just gonna go ahead and very, very, very lightly, just like this, not even pressing hard at all, just do these tiny little circles with my chisel tipped pencil here. And the interesting thing is if you're working with a textured paper, this is the strength of working on a textured paper is you're getting that texture from the paper and it's going to, for this instance, it's going to look like the material of the gall, you know, just coincidentally. So that's a lot of work that's the material is doing for you right there, right? There's some shadow in here. I'm barely going to press in. I'm just going to let the weight of the pencil rest on the paper like that. Okay. And nice and easy, I'm going to make these little circles just like that. I'm going to let the highlights just remain the color of the paper. Everything that isn't a highlight gets this sort of a base coat, so to speak, so that we have some neutral values to pull texture from. And I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Okay, so everything that isn't highlighted, right, is going to get this base coat. Okay, and nice little circles like that. It's good to do this because what you're doing is you're intentionally setting the neutral base, and you're going to be able to pull some really cool textures out of it once it's down on the paper. So for example, let's say I was going to cover this entire gall with this nice base coat here. What's the advantage of doing that? So the advantage would be to kind of pull out these highlights that we're seeing on these bumps, this sort of golf ball like texture in that paper, right? So all I'm doing is I'm making these tiny little circles, barely pushing any weight on the paper. And if I want to make a certain part darker, I'm not going to press harder. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to make a circle just a little bit longer using the same amount of pressure. And now it's going to appear darker because it's driving more material. It's like you're not pushing, you're just making a circle, same as before. You're just doing it for longer in a single space. So more material is is impregnating the tooth of the paper. Just like that. And you can see after doing this for a while, the advantage of putting down the base coat, the advantage of changing the tip of your pencil, right? You're letting your tools do the work for you. That's why we invented tools, to make our work easier. Okay. And just to let the paper, the tooth of the paper, come through here. And if you're working on a flat, like, nice hot press piece of paper, that's fine too. People talk about cold press paper versus hot press paper. It's the process in which the paper is made. And usually the cold press paper has a lot of texture in it. Usually watercolorists work with that kind of paper. Other artists do as well. But for us, I'm using something that's kind of, it is a hot press paper, but there is a tooth here. Okay. So it takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of patience, but the payoff is worth it. Okay, if I have some highlight, again, I'm just going to let the blank of the page show through rather than putting a base coat there. And what I can do is just very, very casually come in there, just like that, add some more texture by putting those dots in. I'm all about dots and circles, as you can imagine. A dot is the simplest form of mark making. Anybody can draw a dot. And since we're planning this out, we're constructing our drawing, thinking like architects, strategically moving step by step towards the end goal. And as we're kind of getting towards the end goal here, I'm looking at the way in which the object is resting on the paper. I'm going to go ahead and grab my eraser and just remove that little measurement dot from earlier because it's not doing anything for me here. And I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, if this is the light source coming from this way, I'm just quickly delineate where that shadow is going to be, like that. Okay, and then I can go ahead and once I'm done filling in, I'm going to try to not cover the drawing with my hand there. Oh, cool, Constance. Thank you for sharing that. So I didn't know that there was a dull tip pencil sharpener. Apparently that's a thing. Very cool. See, when you think you have an original idea, I guess that's just how it works. Yeah, it's funny. I've been working with pencils as mediums as an illustrator for over a decade at this point. And the flat tip thing didn't really occur to me until I guess the past year or so. And once it did, once you understand the technique and how to properly use a medium, it just makes your life so much easier. It makes drawing more fun. It's like that moment when you weren't afraid to drive anymore, Just opens up the world of possibilities to you. All right, so since the top is pretty well lit, I'm just going to go ahead and use my chisel tip pencil here to make some marks that sort of resemble what's happening on the gall. You don't have to make every single mark. It's not something that's mandatory, but just enough to mimic what's happening there is what we're after here. Just to get a little bit more of that shadow up there. And then come in, revisit those areas that are darker. We have this little puncture here where probably a baby wasp took its first steps out into the world. You know, those precious moments, those people say all babies are cute. Are they talking about the wasps too? I don't know, maybe. I'll tell you what, one fun thing I've just picked up recently for my naturalist toolkit is a pocket microscope, a field microscope. Holy moly, I've been missing out. Ever since I started walking around with that thing, it's so cool. The textures, especially if you like looking at flowers and things that have structure to them. You magnify a piece of a flower 120 times and you're going to just enter an entirely different world.
Corey, here's the Who. Find a whole new village.
There you go. You know, one thing I picked up recently too is and all I'm doing really quick as I'm talking here is I'm just revisiting. I'm looking at the bumps here. You can now see the benefit of putting that base coat down first. You see, that base coat that we have here has been able to give us a sort of a contrast, so to speak. Like the light of the paper is the highlight of the object itself, right? Then the base coat is like our neutral tone, and then or our neutral value. Tone infers something different. And then what you do on top of that neutral tone is just spend a little bit more time, make a little darker circle here. Okay, just like this. And it's going to really come out feeling 3D. It's going to be textured, right? That's really cool. Okay. And we have another drawing project to do after this really quick. So I'm just going to hurry along and finish the shading in underneath, just like this, making my circles a little bit wilder than I normally would. It's just 90 minutes flies. So we're just getting past the 40-minute mark here. So I want to get to our pièce de résistance. Okay. And if your pencil isn't doing the right thing, right? Sometimes if we use a pencil that's lead is too hard, this technique can work it won't work as nicely as if you were using a softer material. So that's why in the Eventbrite page I said that a 2B pencil, I was talking about the hardness of the pencil, works best. And if you don't know where to find those, if you need some help tracking down those types of materials, just shoot me an email at the end of class and I'll go ahead and send you a link where you can pick that up. But typical artist pencils, a set will come with a variation of softness and hardness because they each have their own job, right? If you're doing something more technical, you might want a harder lead or graphite than if you were going to use a softer material, okay, like we're using right now. And the softer the material, the easier it is to shade, just like this, okay? Now, what we can do is, at this point, pull out the highlights using, if it's an option, you don't have to do this. You might not even have this. This is just a white charcoal pencil. Okay, so I'm going to look and I'm going to see where on this gall the highlights are, the most highlighted areas are. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to create a couple more of these little bumps there. Okay, just like that. So where else am I seeing? So right here on the top, I'm going to go ahead and highlight the tops of some of these bumps. We have a little section here that's highlighted close to the top of the camera there, just like that. We have a section here at the lip. Okay, there as well. Where else? Somewhere on this back end side here, even on that neutral tone. Towards the top over here. You have some highlights. And this is typically nice if you're working on a different color paper other than white, you know, a tan or a gray. It's just a fun little trick to help the drawing pop a little bit. Somewhat on this leaf here. See some highlight happening. Okay. So I mentioned data earlier. All right, so we may not be able to recognize also exactly what we just drew. Like if for example, someone just walks in the room, they see you drawing, you know, what is a gall? Like they could look at this object and not know what it is. So we're going to help our audience just a little bit by giving them some notes. So I'm going to use my mechanical pencil here, and I'm going to write today's date, which is January the 14th. Happy New Year, everybody. And where did I find this? So I found this in Connecticut State Park. That's a Native American word. You don't have to write that name down, but I believe it's spelled Connequut. I'll put an SP for State Park, and I am in New York. Okay. Okay, so what have we done? We added a timestamp and a location. Okay, so we've started our narrative. Now, what is this object, right? So this would be, I guess it would be an apple gall or a wasp gall. Okay, so we can go ahead and christen this a wasp gall. Okay, and on, let's say, a wasp gall on, I'm going to say over here, wasp gall on a white oak leaf. Okay. So that is our subject. So we have a time, a place, and a subject. What's another piece of information we could add? How about measurement, right? Let's say, for example, I have my ruler here, and I'll go with centimeters, since we're working with an international audience tonight. And I guess scientific measurements are done with the metric system. So this measures about 4 centimeters by, and it's also kind of smushed and smashed. So considering it's an orb, or maybe an egg-like shape, we're going to measure 4 centimeters tall. Okay, and we're not going to count the leaf in the measurement here. Okay, so let's say, for example, okay, let's measure it like that. 4 centimeters by 4.5 centimeters due to it being smushed. All right. So now we've introduced another piece of data. This is our measurement. Okay. So we have our date, we have our timestamp, we have our location, we have the subject, and we have the measurements. So this is now a more interesting drawing for folks to look at. And then now you're going to have the conversation, well, what is a gall? How does it start, etc. Now that you know, you're going to have a conversation with somebody. You're now in the position of being the educator, and the person you're going to speak with is now going to learn something they didn't know before. So this is why, I guess, maybe if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a nature drawing could be worth at least 1,000 words and plus measurements. Okay.
Don't they make some kind of ink or paint out of the gull? Isn't that like something
That's a
they
good
could do with
question.
that? I thought they did, like a gull paint or.
I don't know. That's pretty cool.
Yes, yes, they do make oak gall ink,
Huh?
and I actually have some right here.
No
Yeah,
kidding.
Yeah.
That's
For
a cool
calligraphy,
process.
calligraphers use it, right? I think.
Yeah, calligraphers or yeah, or just for writing or drawing. I
Very
don't know if you
cool.
can see it. Oak, it's
Awesome.
iron oak. They usually add some iron to it
Okay.
for stability.
That's pretty awesome. Good to know. I'll have to keep an eye out when these emerge in the spring. So that's our warm-up exercise. Okay. And what we're going to do next is I'll invite you to grab your other piece of paper. I'm just going to switch this out really quick and make some room in my workspace. And we're going to just direct our attention to the slideshow again really fast. Okay, and we're going to move on to our next exercise. So what we covered in our warm-up are the basic principles of our nature drawing practice, right? We think like the architect. We start with our measurements and our approximations. We use dots as our way to construct a sort of blueprint. And then after that, we use a chiseled tip pencil in order to sort of give ourselves the advantage when we begin shading and adding texture. Okay, so that's the technique in Medium. You can read through this as well. I'm going to be sending everybody a copy. But for today's subject, I picked an eastern gray squirrel. Okay, I feel like the squirrel is one of our unsung heroes of the woodland realm. We see them everywhere, but they don't really get featured in National Geographic all too that often. So I figured this would be a great opportunity to not only get more closely acquainted with one of our neighbors, but to really work that fur texture and to create a drawing that is going to be truly truly feel like winter. You know, the squirrels are one of the animals that you can recognize the change of seasons by.
Sorry, wait, James, National Squirrel Day is January 21st.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I guess we're ahead of the edge there. That's good. So guess what? When National Squirrel Day happens, you can post this on social media and say, I appreciate you, brother or sister squirrel. There you go. Thanks for letting us know. So yeah, so the idea is essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my top-down camera and we're going to draw using this reference photo. I had sent an email prior to the class of this reference photo. So just in case you didn't get that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially I'm going to put in the chat. Okay, we have a little chat feature here on Zoom. I'm going to share with you the reference photo here. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. And also, while that's happening, just prepare your paper by starting to draw a box. Okay. Okay, and then, sorry, this chat thing, ever since Zoom updated, things changed a bit. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to edit this video a little bit so that the folks at home don't have to watch me fiddle around with Zoom. But essentially, start your planning like this by creating this margin. Okay. Also, if you want to check the Eventbrite page that you clicked on, that the file was actually there as well. Okay. So, oh, here it is. Perfect. I'm going to share the reference photo in the chat right now if you didn't have an opportunity to grab it. Okay. And for everybody who does have it, just have it open in a separate window so that way you can look at the reference, but you can also follow along with what I'm drawing as well. Okay, there we go. Should be in the chat. Perfect. So let's go ahead and get at this. I'm going to share my screen one more time and just kind of talk through the strategy here. So here we have this fella over here sitting on top of what looks like a pine bough. Okay, you can tell it's in the pine family because of those long, slender needles. And how we could go about tackling this is we could draw a line straight down the center of the page, both vertically and horizontally, and we'll wind up with 4 different quadrants. And we can see how the squirrel will be laid out in these quadrants, like so. So we could go ahead and demonstrate on paper really quick, but just so you can see on the screen, if we were to divide in half, you'll get 2 halves of the squirrel, and then we'll proceed to get quarters of the squirrel as well. So from the middle here, just going to go ahead and very, very lightly draw a vertical line. And another one over here, horizontally and vertically. And that way, this will be the center of the paper. Okay, and you want it to be a little bit lighter than you normally would just because you're going to erase it later. Okay. So from this point here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start again by considering the height of the subject. Okay, let's say the bottom foot is here. Okay, this is where the top of the tail is going to be. And then considering that we're going to build on this and we're going to get a little bit more accurate as we go. Let's say the squirrel here is about this wide. Okay, so we have this diamond shape again with our dots, and that's what's going to help. We're going to create an outline of the squirrel using this as our sort of boundary. It's okay to go past the boundaries though. That's the thing. That's the ticket. You know, you don't want to be too strict here. And I noticed that the simplest part is the back of the tail because it's sort of like an S shape. So if I were to go ahead and start using my dots, okay, very systematically again, to kind of give myself a basic outline, we can go ahead and work texture and get those hairs in later. Okay, this is going to give me the proportions I need to continue doing my drawing accurately. You know, we have that foot sort of wrapped around the branch here. Okay, we have this sort of haunch. Here's that tiny foot. Okay, just walking around a basic outline here, and feel free to actively edit as you go. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we have an accurate drawing once we get these dots accounted for here. Here's the elbow. Okay, looks like he's got something good. He's munching on some kind of a nut. So for the head, all right, we're not going to worry about too many details just yet. We're going to get them, don't worry. But for now, I'm mostly concerned about proportion, getting the right size. Okay, so I'm going to say that ears are here. Okay, and then there's the rest of that big old fluffy tail. I can make the tail a little bit taller than we originally anticipated. That's fine. I just want to get that curve in there. Brilliant. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, from my initial estimate, I've changed a couple of things. We also have this branch coming through here. Maybe that's something we'd like to consider as well. Just the branch. Don't worry about the needles yet. Okay, so that's a pretty good look. Now, how can we actively edit this? You know, I'm just looking for shapes. I'm looking for the way the haunch sort of makes an oval here. Kind of comes up from the foot. Same thing over there. I'm considering the base of the tail maybe being a little bit lower than I originally thought. Maybe the base of the tail will start around here instead. Okay, so you can see that clear difference. And think about it again, like you're just doing measurements. Like if you're working on a wood project, you know, you're not going to consider the marks you're making when in the measuring process to be mistakes. Those are just your measurements, and you can adjust those as you go. Okay, and then when you're ready to cut, you've measured maybe twice or thrice. Now you're going to feel more confident when you're making that cut. Same applies when you're drawing. We're going to measure twice, cut once. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at these measurements here. I'm going to say, okay, well, that's no biggie. The tail is a little bit different than I originally anticipated. That's fine. I'll go ahead and get rid of this excess so it doesn't mess me up. What else? Yeah, maybe over here by the head too. A little bit down here. Just get rid of the stuff you don't need. Eventually, like we can get rid of these crisscrosses, right? That divided the page, right? We don't need those until, yeah, there we go. We need them until we're ready. Okay, and I feel like we're getting ready. Okay. So here's the outline of our squirrel here sitting on the branch. Okay. Just a bunch of dots, but you can kind of start to see the squirrel. This is our blueprint. This is where our planning is going to come in really, really handy now. Okay. Measure twice, cut once, so to speak. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to consider when I start connecting, what parts do I want to feel really furry and fluffy? And what parts do I want to feel a little bit more fine or smooth? So what I'm going to say is the tail is going to be very fluffy. We'll do that last. Okay, for now, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start with these ears here. And I'm going to connect the dots, not too strictly, but just use the dots as guidelines. Here's the little top of the head and that rounded little nose like that. Okay. And again, the dots are guidelines. They're what's going to help you to continue your drawing here. All right, you look for shapes. You look for things that sort of visually jump out to you that make sense. Like I have this rounded ear here, and there are some pointy, furry hairs around the earlobe. I'm not going to draw those yet. Okay, I'm just going to do the inner part of the ear here. Okay, or a little trick. I'm just going to show you on the back of the page. A little trick. So in order to make something feel hairy, you're not going to make an ear feel hairy when it looks like this. And I'm going to zoom this in a little bit closer so you can see. Okay. An ear, however, that looks like this feels more furry. Why? The difference is the space that is in between, right? We have a furry texture because there's a lot of air. There's a lot of room for the imagination. So when we do this realistically, right? Let's say, okay, here's the squirrel's ear. If we go ahead and use our pencil to make dots like this and dashes, just simple mark making. This is the inner hair on the ear, okay? That's going to really help us to sell the idea that this is a furry ear, just like this, okay? Notice how we have this sort of triangular shape here, right? Which is where the ear grows onto the head, or it was grafted onto the head like that. And then as the ear comes around, you're going to see these hairs stick out quite wildly. Okay. So that hair, that fluffiness is going to come from the space that's in between these marks. Okay. Because if you just go ahead and try to draw it like this, it's not going to feel hairy at all. So that's the trick. That's how we're going to make these ears feel fluffy. All right. So I'm going to adjust really quick again. Hello. All righty. So let's go ahead and work on these ears here. And what I'm going to do is consider how all of this hair like this is nice and spaced out Okay, and consists of these different marks like that. And that'll help it feel more fluffy. All right. And we'll get to the inner parts of the ear in just a second, because we got to do a little bit more work on this head here. So in this area here, we have this beautiful eye. Okay, it's sort of like kind of like an almond shape towards the tip, like that. Okay. And the way in which I believe you can really get a good animal drawing is if you get the eyes right. You get a lot of soul in the eye, the animal's spirits there. You can really kind of just feel it, that it's alive when you get the eyes just right. So what I like to do is I start with the shape, and I try to imagine it as if it is sitting in a socket, which it is. Okay. And it kind of looks like he's wearing mascara, but don't worry, we're gonna fill that eye in. But before we do that, we're gonna go ahead and draw a little highlight here. Just a circle or an hourglass shape. We can do a couple just like this. Any more and it'll kind of feel like an anime, so you don't want to do it too crazy. And then around the outer edge, let's go ahead and just quickly make some dots there. Okay, this is going to feel like the way like you're creating a socket with these textures. And then you'll get in there just like that and fill in that eye, but leave those highlights blank. Okay, that's going to help your squirrel feel more alive. I just wanted to do that part, get it done right the first time so that we can continue building from there. Okay, and I just like to do this. See how I'm making these sort of outlines of the socket as well? Like I want to give that realistic feel to it. So I'm creating these little dots and dashes, again with the dots, this guy, right? But it works. It works. It really does. We're creating this sort of furry, lifelike texture there. And honestly, it's dashes and dots. Everybody here can do that. No fear. Okay. So we have this part. Let's get back into building the head, right? We have this part where the head kind of slopes down and we meet the nose, and then we get into the mouth area. Okay, let's go ahead. Get into that mouth area. It looks like he's chowing down on something good, right? So if you're having a little bit of trouble seeing what he's chowing down on, you could just do a little bit of a zoom in here. Okay, it looks like, yeah, we have a paw that might be a little bit lower than we originally anticipated. So let's go ahead and raise that paw up a little bit, just a tad. Okay, we got these wonderful climbing claws. That's why you don't want a squirrel climbing up your leg, because of claws like this. So next time you're at a family barbecue, I don't recommend the old squirrel running up the leg routine. Okay. So I love the way in which they hold their food. It's very human-like, right? Okay, so the fingers, all I'm doing is, see the dots I'm making? I'm not technically drawing, I'm planning these fingers out before I dare draw them. Okay, and the reason why is because measure twice, cut once, right? Or also think like an architect. We want to have our blueprints before we start building. Okay, and I've never really, one of the nice things is I've never really looked at a squirrel's paw this closely before. So what this drawing is forcing me to do as the artist is I am now looking and seeing these claws and how they protrude from their fingers, which are kind of chubby. That makes them cuter. Okay, and this is just kind of wrapped around the nut that it's eating here. Okay, so this is still the hand. And the nut comes out here. Say, kind of looks like he's eating a peanut. Which begs the question, did the photographer bribe this squirrel? Possibly. So here's some shrapnel from the shell of the nut here. Kind of papery in texture, just like our gall. Okay, so we got some evidence of bribery, of squirrel bribery here. To stand still for the camera. And this is the kind of trick I like to do. I look at where the cheekbone is and I kind of follow that brown of the fur all the way to the end. So that way I can kind of gauge how wide I should make the top of the mouth here. Okay, because this is all in shadow in there and it's kind of tricky to discern without zooming in. So that's why I use the brown of the fur. So I watch to see where the brown becomes gray. Okay. And it almost looks like the top of his head was dipped in a sort of brown paint, right? Because you'll see it around the eye. You'll see it, this whole top of the head is this sort of reddish brown tint to it. Okay. And also we have this this arm coming up there as well, which kind of gets really close to the ear because that's connected to the shoulder, and that makes sense. Okay, we also have the way the fur is growing inside the ear. Again, dashes and dots just like that. Leave a lot of white space in between these marks, aka room for the imagination. Okay, what about that nose? The nose is kind of inconspicuous. It's not really much of a dominant feature in the face here. But for the hairs on the head, oh, and also if you're afraid of smudging your work by accident, one of the tricks you can do is just take a little piece of scrap paper here and put your hand on top of the scrap paper so your hand doesn't accidentally smudge your work. And I'm using a sharp pencil for this. The sharper the better for right now, because what I'm doing is I'm creating little hairs that are going to help sell the fact that this is a furry squirrel. Okay, despite the fact that it's been rendered in pencil, we still have to have it appear very furry. Okay, and that's kind of just the trick here. A lot of character here in this mischievous face, these cute little hands with razor sharp claws. Okay, this is where that area is where the gray and the red meet, like right in there. So I'm just being very delicate with it. I'm not overdoing, I don't want to overdo the hair on the face. Again, you want to leave some room for the imagination there. So one of my friends likes to use the pool, you know, when you play a game of pool, you kiss the ball on the side just to kind of tip it in gently. So you just want to like kind of kiss it on the side. You don't want to be too heavy-handed with your application of the fur here. Just like that. Okay. This is the hard part right here. The rest of it's going to be a breeze comparatively. So I like to get the hard part done first, because once you feel that sense of relief, it just makes the rest of the drawing experience so much nicer. There we go. Let's get that nut in there right here. Okay, peanut. Might want to make it an acorn so it feels more natural. So I think I'm just going to use my artistic license to change what he's eating really quick. It's not like anybody can tell anyways. And the way I get the roundness is I use these sort of directional lines here. And that helps to demonstrate that this is a round object. You start by following the direction of what's happening on each side. So since it's shaped like a U, okay, on the left, lines will bend this way. And as you get towards the center, it straightens out, and then it starts to bend the opposite way. That'll help to show and define that that is in fact a rounded object. Okay, there's a little bit of shadow in there, so I'm going to get that. And there's these little pads underneath the fur. Okay, right on the fingertips. If you even want to go that far, you don't have to. If it's too much detail, don't worry about it. Okay. Okay, and here we go. All right, still got a bit of work to do here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to sort of use the power of suggestion to my advantage and not get too heavy with all that fur here. And I'm going to show that the underside of the other hand comes up like that. Okay, because we do have two hands after all here that are doing the job. If you want, you can use this base of the ear to sort of know where the shoulder starts. And you can work that shoulder down into the bend of the elbow, which is like around here, and to the top of that forearm, which is here. Being mindful to use that sort of technique to get that fur look, okay? And we'll worry about the rest of the face in a bit. So what I want to do next is I want to make my way from the elbow down to the belly. Okay, it's winter, so I got that extra fluffy white belly. Okay. And then we have that nice paw, that foot that is gracefully gripping the bow. Okay, we have another claw coming down. Just like that. Another one right next to it. Another one right next to it. Okay. And for such a common everyday creature, you don't really think twice about them. But when you stop and you draw them and you begin to look at their anatomy and their shape, you can kind of appreciate their natural ability a little bit better, their natural ability to climb, basically run up vertical objects. It's very much, I guess, an attribute to these claws that we're drawing right now. Okay, so we have a sort of a rounded shape like this. And I just want to use my dots to get that elbow accurately in there. Same thing with this side too. You got this sort of reddish brown that might be kind of advantageous to use as a sort of measuring tool to see if everything's to scale, which it looks like we're in pretty good shape so far. And then we'll worry about the tail last. Again, that's going to be the fun hair part. Okay, we got about 15 minutes left in class, so I'm pretty confident we'll be able to finish this squirrel drawing in pencil. Okay, here's that other foot. Get a good look at the claws on that one, especially if you zoom in. But it's a little bit obscured by the needles of the pine that it's sitting on, so we get a little freebie there. You don't have to draw every single toe. If you don't want to, that's fine. Okay. So just using some very deliberate mark making there. Again, using a lot of dots and dashes, create that white space, make some room so that it feels hairy and furry. Now we can also take note that the direction of the hair in which it grows is important, right? So look at this. We have this hairy sort of texture that changes direction because this is where that kind of fold is. But then it also grows in this direction because it's growing over the top of that haunch, right? And from here, it grows up and down. Like up and down, up and down, up and down all around. So just pay attention to the direction in which the hair is growing. It's growing in this direction over here. And that'll also add to like the sort of furry texture in a realistic manner. Just like that. You don't have to go too crazy. You don't have to go too nuts. But just acknowledge at least a little bit that direction in which the hair is growing, and it'll benefit your drawing tremendously. Okay. Okay, so here's the foot. All right. We have the elbow, which is kind of tucked in. Okay, and again, the hair kind of comes off the top here. Grows in this direction now. Fascinating. Okay. Okay, so it kind of crests over the top, like if this were a hill here, and then comes down this angle like that. Okay, so it comes up and down, sort of like a hill. And as it comes closer here to that little center area, it'll change direction again. So we're going to go ahead and acknowledge that directional change. It kind of straightens out a little bit, and then it starts to come back around again, just like this. Okay. And that's where the tail comes out from, right around here. Okay, and I think I'm going to make one more adjustment, one more active edit. Okay, and if the tail is going to come out from down here, I'm going to have to make it a little bit wider than before. Okay, so it's a good process. It's a good way to think about it like measuring. So this is sort of the end step is just get rid of extra dots that you don't need. Check out your edits, make sure that it feels right. Okay, we still have some work to do up in the upper body here, but I don't think it would hurt if we started with this tail. Now, the tail is a tricky part because you're going to look at hair growing in all kinds of crazy different directions. Like that's sort of what gives it that fluffiness is the amount of hair, the space between the hair like this. See, I'm kind of crisscrossing in some capacity a little bit. In fact, you could even push it out above this margin here. Give it kind of like a 3D effect. But you want to work it on the outer edge first and then come towards the middle because this kind of helps to give the overall outline just like we were doing earlier. It also helps you to define more clearly the direction of the hairs because you're going to see them follow the shape. It's going to be very true to the shape. And I'm going to go ahead and the dots are going to kind of defeat the illusion here. So I'm going to erase the dots pretty much completely just so I can barely see them. So that as I make my way down the squirrel's tail like this, they're not going to destroy the illusion. Okay, see how the hairs are growing in different directions? It can get maddening, but we're not going to worry about it because we're not going to draw every single hair. Okay, just enough to make it feel fluffy, right? Okay, we have this area in here. We're going to close up, tighten up a little bit. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit. And when we get into the shading part, I'm just going to darken that all up so I don't have to do the extra work. There is such a thing though, in all honesty, there is such a thing as working something too much. Like if we were to do this texture all over the squirrel, yeah, it might not look as good as you think. So if we just pick key areas and then leave some of it blank, like in here, it'll do a lot of good. Okay. Like I kind of went a little bit too far in here, not too far enough to like, ruin the drawing or anything, but like if I wanted to be a little bit more conservative with the time I had, you know, maybe I wouldn't have filled this entire area in with these hairs like this. See, it's fine, not a big deal. Just a preference, personal preference. Again, it's one of the nice things about being the artist is you get to work according to your personal preferences. How many jobs they let you do that? Okay. So the way in which the squirrel is sitting, it's kind of like this is acting like a blanket almost, like sort of warming blanket. That's going to mean that the hairs grow in a different direction yet again. So just it's good to acknowledge that as it's coming up from underneath from the shadow, it's kind of coming up gradually and bending this way. Okay, you're going to start seeing it go this way now. Okay, in here I'm going to shade, so that's why I have this space sort of marked out. Same thing here, I'm going to shade there. Okay, and go ahead and shade in the arms a little bit too. You don't want to make it, again, you don't want to overdo it. Just want to kiss it on the side, just like that 8-ball. Okay. Just looking and seeing how the hair is growing, the different directions. Okay. If you started the shading part, that's okay. Go ahead and just continue using that nice circular movement, chisel tip pencil. Don't rush it. It's fine. Okay. So underside there, a little bit darker. Okay, you have this rounded shape here we want to acknowledge as well. It's kind of enjoyable drawing these nice textures because it gives you an opportunity to learn how to draw, like fur, for example. Well, now your fox drawings or your dog drawings or your deer drawings are going to look a lot nicer because you spent some time working on one kind of fur. Makes your other types of fur easier to render, like your bears or your raccoons or whatever. You'll have an easier time of it, is what I'm trying to say, in the future. Okay. Just following the direction of the growths of these hairs. Maybe it's a little bit windy, so the hair might be blowing all over the place, the fur. Sitting up high on a tree on a January morning. Just had his cup of coffee. Now he's enjoying a acorn. Okay. So let's go ahead and define the surface. So I'm not even going to draw the whole branch, just enough to get the point, I think is nice. Okay. Maybe I'll go ahead and draw one of those little fossicles that the pine needles grow out. Just like that. Usually they grow in bundles of 3, depending upon the species. I think white pine does that. There we go. Okay, we got some more growth here. Maybe you can do if you want to add some more pine needles into the mix. Just make sure that they're growing like pine needles. When I say a fossicle, that's kind of like a hair follicle. Okay, and you want them to have a realistic place that they're coming from. Okay, it looks like he's standing on top of them too. It's kind of like matted down. That's kind of neat. There we go. And again, we don't have to draw the whole thing there. Okay, and for the part that I want to shade, don't want to do it too much, just enough to make a point here. Okay. I might stay just a little bit longer to finish this. I know we only have like 3 minutes left on the clock, but I'm having fun with everybody here today. I'm very happy and thankful everyone came out. So if you want, you don't have to stay the extra time with me. You can always watch the recording, which I'll email to everybody at the end of the class. But just so you know, we as a group raised a little over $200 for the Dedham Food Pantry. So that's very nice. So everybody, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you for supporting the Dedham Library, as well as for the Dedham Food Pantry. Libraries are wonderful places. Not only is it a great place for you to learn, but it's a great place for you to meet people who like to learn. And they have all kinds of wonderful programs like this. Are there any programs coming up that you'd like to plug here in the video? Jonah?
You know what? Let me take a quick look, Mary Ellen, too, if you can think of anything.
Sure.
Hold on. Where's my book?
No worries. And I'm also going to be
We've got,
sharing. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say we've got a great gardening program coming up next Tuesday. We're collaborating with Seedlinked, and they're doing some fascinating work around vegetable seeds and getting kind of a citizen science thing going on
Nice.
as well. So next Tuesday, let me just make sure. Next Tuesday at 6 o'clock, the 19th. It's called The Story of Seed. They're going to be focusing on really the whole biology of seeds, just the story of seeds,
That sounds
why,
cool.
why, how, what, all those important questions.
Yeah, it's really
And
great.
yeah, and we have a great mindfulness series. It just started yesterday, but we've got 3 more sessions coming up, and those are on Wednesdays. So yeah, good stuff. Check out
Nice.
the library website and the calendar of virtual events.
Very cool. I'm going to go ahead and also send an email at the end of class, and in it you'll get the recording, you'll get the lesson packet with all the important learning points for today, and I'll also be sure to include a link to the library's website as well, so that you can always go there and browse and see if there's anything that you'd be interested in participating in. Okay.
Yeah, and in February we'll also be doing part 2 and 3 of this series. We'll
That's
be
right.
doing nature journaling and map making, right? Is that the
Yeah.
third one?
So if you're
Jim?
interested in picking up a new hobby, right? It's a great opportunity to take what we did in this class and bring it with you out on the trail, which it is what I encourage in all of the classes. Really, these are the tools you need to draw on your own out in nature, and nature journaling is like this. Sort of like what we did with our warm up, right? We had our nature object, and the nature journal is just a great way to keep all of your drawings in one place, but it's also a great way to make them portable. So I'm going to give you a link for you to sign up for that event. It's all in Eventbrite. So that way you can have an opportunity to join us for another class. And I'll go ahead and just take a pause from this so that I can share my screen for the folks who have to go. What I'm going to do here is, here we go. We have our squirrel friend here. Yeah, so this is some other stuff you can go ahead and read through. These are some great ways to stay inspired and keep doing what we did here in class. Keep going in real life. These are some additional resources for you to peruse. All of these I've hyperlinked, so when I email you this, you can click on these and explore and use these tools to help you grow in your nature drawing practice. Since this is a library event, see if you can check these books out from the Dedham Library. If you're not in that area, I've also hyperlinked these books as well. These are some ones that I'm reading. I'm most of the way through Cosmos, which is a pretty far out book. But these are all some great recommended reading for everybody here. If you're interested, we have a Facebook group. It's a wonderful community of nature-loving artists just like ourselves. It's a great way to get first dibs on workshops when they come out. It's also a place where I post coupons and discounts, and we also do a monthly drawing social together just for fun. It's totally free of charge. So if you're interested, head over to facebook.com/groups/hike and draw and join the community there. And these are the other hike and draw events that we have coming up. We have an anthropomorphic character design class. That's one of our teachers, Connor Nolan, who's going to teach you how to draw characters based on animals. So if you're working on a children's book or a comic or a game or something like that, it's a great opportunity to learn that skill. We also have a botanical drawing class coming up. If you're interested in learning more about the morphology of plants, we're going to be doing the paper birch. We're going to be doing a hiking skills class. So that's one I'm going to be working on with the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference and a guiding service called Adventure Untamed. So that's a basic hiking skills, how to use a compass class. And then we have a landscape drawing class to finish the month. And just to reiterate what we said earlier, on the 1st is our nature journaling class, 1st of February that is. And on the 8th is our map making class. Okay, and those are specifically sponsored by the Dedham Public Library. So I also have some discount here for you too if you want to pick up a new nature journal. That's a coupon code you can use at checkout when you go to this website. I use these sketchbooks out in the field because they're tough and they can take a beating, which is important when you're a wilderness guide. You want gear that you can depend on. So that's a nice coupon code for you there. And that is all we have for today.
Is there a hashtag if we post our drawings on Instagram? Is there a hashtag you would like us to use?
Yes, please. You can do hashtag hike and draw or hashtag hike and draw NYC. Right. Cool. So thank you all so much for coming through today. I loved having your company, and it was wonderful being able to share this experience together. Yeah, I'm going to stick around for a little while longer to just finish up this squirrel drawing. And if you want, you can go ahead and send me your feedback and send me pictures of your drawings if you want some tips, and I'll be happy to help out. Cool. All right, so I'm going to switch my camera.
Awesome.
Thank
This
you.
was awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Really,
so
really great. Never thought I'd draw a squirrel in my life. So that's awesome.
I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you came. Thank you.
really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So keep an eye out for that email, and I'll be sending that out. It takes a little bit of time for the video file to process. So be patient with that. You might get that either tonight or tomorrow morning, depending how long it takes. But I'm going to make sure that everybody gets the email with at least the lesson packet tonight and my finished drawing here. So that's what we can expect. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Be safe, everybody. All right, so for what I'm doing here is, remember that idea earlier where we had our base coat and we added some more layers to it? So I made the base coat here with the hairs. I'm going to kind of overlap that base coat and paying attention to how the hair is growing like this. And it adds a nice little extra dimension here to the fur on the tail. And you can go ahead and use that nice circle technique just like that. Yeah, well, we're chat. I haven't even been looking at that too often. Oh, thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Okay.
Yeah. There
we go. Alrighty. So again, you want to have that chisel tip so that you're getting the right type of coverage here. You don't want to have little circles. You want to make circular motions without seeing the circles. Okay, so it's definitely it can be a labor-intensive process, but it's always good to come out with something that you're proud of at the end of the day. And nothing says welcome to my refrigerator like a squirrel drawing. Okay, so now we have a nice little coverage here. And one little trick I like to do is if I want to have like the frosted tips, like the whiter tips at the end, I'll take my kneaded eraser and I'll just push it down just like that at the very edge. Okay, and that's going to lighten it up a little bit. Kind of be like a fade out effect. And you're going to lose some of the hairs, okay? But you can just come back in and redraw those. But it's nice to have that sort of faded look, that gradual fade towards the tip.
Yeah.
And again, you have that nice base coat. So when you do these hairs on top of the base coat like that, it adds that extra layer of dimension and helps to really sell that three-dimensional look. Okay. Especially if you're being true to the direction in which the hair grows, the fur. Okay. Okay. Take care. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty. Got some nice shadow underneath here that I want to capture as well. Just like that. Okay, and we're seeing some progress here. Just paying close attention to where those highlights are happening, and I'm leaving that part of the page blank, but in the parts that kind of need that base coat, I'm just coming in with my pencil again with the circles. Okay, just very, very, very lightly, barely even letting the pencil touch the paper, using that chisel tip to do its job.
It's better.
So what I'm doing here is I'm just sort of working my way up the arm. Okay, just giving a little bit of value here to the hand. These paws are clutching precious item here, so we don't want to underserve those. And then there's some shadow here, particularly around the mouth, that I want to get for two reasons. It's going to let the shell sort of stand out because it's tearing that shell apart, but it's also going to help us to define more clearly the arm from the head. Okay. And that nose, I want to make sure that nose gets a little bit of color underneath, just like that. A little rascal, there he is. Okay. Just getting that base coat. And then there's a lot of white fine hairs on the ears that we want to leave alone. Okay, so as we're shading in the ear, there's some stuff we don't want to touch. Okay, and it's kind of fun seeing it all come together, you know? We started out with 4 dots, and now we're here. And again, if you want to get a darker shadow, you don't push harder, you just spend more time in the same spot, doing the same circles with the same amount of pressure. And that's what's going to help you seal the deal. Especially getting the darker shadows in by this tail back here and up the body. Okay, just make sure that your pencil's in the right shape, that chisel tip, and that's going to help you out a lot more. All right. Getting some good values there. You just kind of want to think about the material of the pencil a little bit like paint. You work in layers. Some other branches in the background. Okay. Glad you had fun, Ginger.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Hope to see you at the next one we do.
You will, for sure.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Just going to spend a little bit more time up here, making this a little darker. Same way as before, I'm not pressing hard, just going up, adding another coat. That's basically the idea. Definitely want to get some more foliage up here. It looks like the squirrel's sort of floating off into space, and we don't want that. So there we go. There we go. That's kind of cool. I'm using the flattest part of the pencil, that little chisel tip, to kind of create a little fur texture on top of that base coat, a little bit like that. Still kind of deciding if I like it or not, but here's to experimenting. There we go. Yeah, I guess I like it. It's pretty fun. As long as I'm following the right direction, the hairs are growing, be in good shape. Yeah. Alrighty. So there's our furry friend.
Oh.
Okay, and if you like, you can go ahead and add your initial there. And there's our Eastern Gray.
Ooh.
All right.
Great.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. So that
All right.
is the conclusion. We went about 20 minutes over what we said, but I hope you enjoyed it. And feel free to send me emails of your finished drawings, or join the Facebook group and post them there. And we'll be happy to give you constructive feedback, and be happy to see you again in another class real soon.
Great. Will do. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Take care.